Hi, welcome to Enter Sun Here Yoga. My name is Anita. I'm going to go over some tips for the beginning yoga student today. You always want to practice yoga on a fairly empty stomach, so give yourself about an hour and a half to 2 hours after you've eaten your last meal, depending on the size of the meal and how fast you tend to metabolize your food. And the reason for that is we're going to be lifting and opening and twisting and turning and bending and massaging those internal organs. You're going to be trying to draw in that nice big yoga breath, moving the chest and the belly cavities, and that can tend to be uncomfortable if the belly is full of food. It can also inhibit the amount of space in there to draw those nice deep yoga breaths in. And if there's one prop that I always encourage my yoga students to buy, that is a yoga mat or a sticky mat. And the reason for that is literally it is a sticky mat. So that as you're standing in those wide poses or you're in the downward dogs and your hands and your feet aren't slipping out from underneath you, so that you're not focusing on that part, standing there wondering, is my lower half going to fall out from underneath me, but that you can just sink in and relax and draw your focus and attention to other areas of your practice where you should be. The one thing that you want to remember about your yoga mat is you want to put the correct side facing up, or the sticky side facing up. And nowadays they do make a lot of yoga mats that are double sticky or sticky on both sides, and you may read the instructions and find that out. But the best way to tell is usually your mat will have a texture or a bubble shape to one side, or you may have a tag on top and then the back side will be flat. But the best way to tell really is just to throw your mat out there. Put your feet out nice and wide on it. Shift the weight to the outer soles of the feet. And if your feet don't feel like they're slipping out from underneath you, and your hands and feet don't feel like they're slipping out from underneath you in the downward dogs or the kneeling poses, then you've probably got the right side of the mat facing up. Which brings me to my next point, is you always want to practice yoga on a bare foot. And that's not just because your mat is designed to work naturally with the bare foot so they don't slip out from underneath you, but also you want to bring your feet out of the shoes and give them a nice stretch. You rotate through the ankles and the toes, you curl up, and you start to make that natural connection to the ground beneath you. You start to build that nice yoga alignment from the soles of the feet all the way up through the crown of the head. You'll start to be able to feel with a natural foot on the floor which parts of your feet you tend to be holding more weight on, and to be able to learn to balance that weight evenly and start to sink into the soles of the feet a little better. You also get a nice massage through those feet as you're working through your yoga practice. Your clothing should always be comfortable, breathable, flexible. There's nothing worse than getting into a nice deep stretch or trying to get into that stretch and finding out that your material doesn't stretch and you're inhibited by your clothing. So just make sure that it's something comfortable and flexible and stretchy that you wear. A few props that you may want to have nearby and handy for most of the yoga classes that we do are a blanket and some kind of version of a block. And you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a block. You can use just 2 soup cans out of the kitchen cupboard. You can use a taller one and a smaller one to adjust just like you would the block. But the blocks are great to use in some of the standing poses like the forward folds or the triangle poses. They just help to keep that nice spinal alignment, that posture all the way up. So as you're in the pose, you're not rounding and concaving and losing that posture, but you're able to really get those few extra inches in and lengthen out through the levers and really open up so you can take a nice deep belly breath in as you're in the poses. And the great thing about the blocks, but you can use it with a can as well. You'd start with a taller can or a taller block, and as you gain flexibility and strength, you go lower and lower to the floor until eventually you're able to place the hands on the floor to modify, or somewhere on the body to modify. And the other good point about the blocks are you may use the taller side in one pose and may be able to use the lower side in another pose as well. So they're very versatile in all the different poses. Everybody has a blanket in their house and they are very handy for yoga. You can use them in final relaxation, shavasana, or meditation poses. to just keep the warmth in the body by placing it over your body like you would a blanket. Some people like to bring them all the way up over their head and make themselves a nice little cocoon with the blanket. You can also, for example, use it, roll it up in a nice long tube shape, place it across the middle of the spine and final relaxation, and support the neck and just open up the shoulders and chest. Some people like to use them or a pillow and sit on, for example, to help them get into some of the poses. If you tend to have tighter hips, for example, in cross-legged seated pose, and your hips tend to be up here and your shoulders tend to round in, you can use that simply by drawing to the front edge of the blanket, and it gives you just a little bit different angle and a little bit different leverage in the pose, so you can really open up and sink into the pose and relax and be able to stay there and calm your breath down and get the benefit of the pose without having to feel agitated or irritated in being in the pose. You get to create your own space when you're in your own home, so that's one of the great benefits of practicing in your own home. You can create your ambiance. Dim the lights, you can light candles, you can use incense, any kind of smells or aromatherapies that you enjoy and like to use and feel comfortable using. You get to create your own little space. So I would recommend that you take about 4 or 5 minutes before your practice to do all of those things and to come into your practice with intention, and let everyone know in your family or your friends or whoever may walk in or come in during your yoga practice that you're going to take this next half an hour or 40 minutes or however long is the video that you've chosen, however long it is, and really focus inward and not be distracted by everything that could come by you. So let everybody know that you're going to honor your practice and ask them to honor and respect your practice as well. As you work through your practice, you will find so many amazing benefits to yoga. The body, the mind, the spirit, the breath, all of those things will be enhanced, and that enhancement will translate to every facet of your life. You'll learn to keep that breath calm and consistent throughout your day as stressors come at you, and you'll be able to handle that stress a little better. You'll build strength and flexibility in the body. It will affect your mind and your spirit and everything. But all of that will come in time. As you first start to practice yoga, just let all of that go. Know that it will come in time. And your first couple of times, if you only practice on a few things, you want to focus on your stance, really widening and opening up and keeping your breath calm and consistent and really honoring your body. When we start something new, we tend to be kind of closed off and we're not quite knowing what's going on. And if you're watching the video, you may be looking up and down. The faster you can get to lengthen out the levers and really open up in the poses, you'll get into those poses with a lot more ease. We tend to start here, and then the next class you may be here, and then the next class you're like, oh, okay, I like this pose. I know what we're doing. So the faster you can get out to this point, the more ease you'll feel into the poses in the beginning, and the easier that will translate, and the better footing you'll put yourself on as you start. The breath you want to always keep consistent. If there's only one thing I tell students in the first couple of classes to focus on, it's to keep the breath consistent. And whether it's consistent in a nice rhythmic pace where we're moving and warming up and working the body, or it's consistent in the slow, relaxing, restorative breath. For us to think about our breaths for an entire hour is kind of an odd concept. But if you can do that for your first couple of classes, when your mind starts to wander, just drop back with the breath. When you're in a pose that you're not quite used to and you don't know, just come into the breath and focus on the breath. When you're in a deep stretch or a deep lunge, keep that breath consistent, because the first thing that we tend to do is our mind starts to wander because we're not used to meditating, or we're not used to being inside our body and really listening to our body. And as we do some of those challenging poses, the first thing that happens is our breath starts to seize up and we lose that fluidity and that natural flow of our breath. And as you get into some of the deeper stretches, you start to tense up. Which brings me to my last point. Really honor your body and respect your body and listen to your body, because it will tell you so many things if you just listen to it. You should never feel any pain in any of the yoga poses. If you start to feel any discomfort as you get into the pose, or you start to feel like you're pushing beyond your edge in the lunges so that you're starting to be shaky, or you're starting to become wobbly in the pose, or you're pushing beyond a stretch, your body will give you all of those signs. It will start to contract the muscles, it will start to feel a little bit uncomfortable, and those are all signs from your body saying, you're pushing beyond my limits today, or beyond my limits, period. So if you get into those poses, really listen to those signs and cues in your body so that you can prevent any injuries. As you're working through your yoga practice, you may find that in one pose you're just really opened up and stretching and reaching and enjoying that pose and feeling all the benefits. But you may get in that pose, for example, a pigeon pose or a tree pose the next time, and find that you're fighting the pose a little bit, or you're not able to get back into the pose, and you're thinking, well, 2 weeks ago I did this and I was here, and what happened to it? Where did I go? You have to remember, you carry stress and tension, and you're bombarded with it a little bit differently each day. You may have gotten disrupted, or in an argument, or something may have caused you some stress in the day, or you may just be feeling tighter, or you may not have warmed up the muscles a little bit warmer than as they were a few days before. So there are many factors that affect your practice from day to day. So try not to judge your progress or hinder your progress in that way. Just let it go and know that some days you may not sink all the way into the pose. Other days it may be exactly what your body needs, and you're able to let go and really enjoy the pose. So just listen on those days. If you start to feel that discomfort or that ease, listen to your body and back off and try some of the modifications in the poses and see if that helps, and use your breath to sink back in and open up the pose. I'm so glad that you chose Enter Zen here Yoga. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy your video. Namaste.